bright so they glow green, like jelly-ish protein in them.
Good. Hey guys, get started.
Good morning. Welcome to nyf.com. We're doing a Facebook Live this morning here at SUNY-ESF. I'm Glenn Coyne. I cover environment and weather here at NYF, the Post Standard. And we're here with Brian Leydet, who is a researcher at SUNY-ESF and Upstate Hospital on ticks. So Brian, I'll let you talk a little bit about who you are, how you got here, and what your research on ticks is.
Sure, thank you, Glenn. So Brian Leydet, I'm an assistant professor at SUNY and ESF. I'm also an adjunct professor at SUNY Upstate Medical College. My research in ticks started about 10 years ago. My master's studies down in Florida. I researched ticks down in Florida, diseases in humans. Continued that in Louisiana State University, Go Tigers, where I got my PhD. Studied, a little plug there, where I studied Lyme disease in nature, in mammal populations and ticks, and also transmission in the lab with different species of Lyme borrelia, so doing tick-animal transmission models, looking at immunology. I continued my research up in the Adirondacks and a postdoc at the Trudeau Institute, where we looked at the invasion of Ixodes scapularis up into the Adirondack Park from Albany up into Saranac Lake.
Yeah, just stop for a second. You just threw out a term that probably most people aren't familiar with.
What's that term?
The term scapularis.
So, okay, yeah, it's so common for me. So Ixodes scapularis is the black-legged tick, also known as the deer tick, but more correctly known as the black-legged tick when it comes to our Entomological Society of America. That is the tick that we come in contact with most here in upstate New York.
And that's one that transmits Lyme.
That is the one that transmits Lyme disease, the black-legged tick, yes, Ixodes scapularis. Okay. So I continued my work up at Trudeau, and we studied the invasion between Albany and Saranac Lake, doing small mammal trapping, looking at ticks in different populations, looking at the genetics of the bacteria and the ticks throughout the Adirondacks. And then I got hired by SUNY-ESF, and now I'm here where I run a lab, again expanding upon some of the invasion work, where I have students in the Adirondacks and in Albany collecting ticks and small mammals to look at some really interesting questions. We are also doing work currently with people here at ESF studying the ticks on birds in Onondaga County and looking at the bacteria that are in ticks on birds here in Onondaga County. And I'm continuing my work looking at transmission, looking at trying to find ways to disrupt transmission of Borrelia burgdorferi from the tick to the host.
Okay, and that's the bacteria.
Borrelia burgdorferi, yes, that is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease,
Lyme,
correct.
So your Lyme disease was first identified down in Connecticut. It has marched steadily northward and westward. So tell us about that movement and what's caused it and where it is right now.
Yeah, the history of Lyme disease is very interesting, and I love talking about history because I love the History Channel, and I like watching it and learning about what I'm studying. But yeah, it was described in Lyme, Connecticut, but a lot of people don't know it was actually first described by a dermatologist in Sweden. And in the 1800s, Obzelus obzelii, if I pronounced the name right, noticed that patients were getting rashes after the bite of a tick. They didn't know what was causing it. And this was the manifestation of Lyme disease in Europe. He actually came over to the United States in the 1950s and gave a talk about this in Missouri, about the patients he had in Europe. Meanwhile, we were having patients here in the United States. It wasn't until Dr. Alan Steer discovered it in a subset of patients, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis patients in Lyme, Connecticut, that was actually a spirochete. William Burgdorfer, also at the Rocky Mountain Labs, played a role in finding this spirochete associated with this disease. Now Europe and the United States has the disease. We've seen the spread of this disease, probably a lot of different factors. The tick is spreading, and we know that, and it's likely spreading due to global climate change. So new environments are becoming more hospitable for the tick. But there's also things that humans are doing that make habitats more suitable for small mammal species. We're bringing back the forest, so we're supporting higher deer densities, which supports higher tick densities. So that's just confounding or adding to the re-emergence of this disease.
Okay. And density is the sheer number of ticks in any given area.
In any given area. It's the sheer number of ticks in any given area.
And the higher that is, the higher your risk.
If the disease is there, yes, because you'll have more likely come in contact with the tick in a high-density situation.
Let's talk about it that way. How do we reduce our contact? How do we protect ourselves against tick bites and therefore Lyme and the other diseases?
Yeah, so part of my background is training in public health. So I love talking to the public about what they can do to prevent disease, because that's what public health is disease prevention and doing things to prevent disease. And what I recommend people to do in preventing Lyme disease is first to be educated. You need to know that when you're outdoors, you need to know if you're in a tick habitat. Are there ticks around you? Well, if you're around a forest, there's ticks around you. You just have to be aware of that. And to be aware, to look for ticks, to know that you can potentially have a tick get on you. I recommend people wear long pants when they go out on hikes or go into tick habitats, and when they're working on the edge of their yard at the edge of forest. You know, if you're working out in the middle of a dry field or, you know, doing construction down in downtown Syracuse, you don't have to worry about ticks. They're not hanging out on the blacktop. They're dying. But in your yard, you need to be aware. And as you walk around, you contact high grasses or twigs. Look down where ticks are grabbing on. They're grabbing on usually down in your lower legs. So you see these ticks climbing up. Take the ticks, throw them off, or kill them, or whatever you want to do with them. If you want to protect yourself using a product, I recommend a permethrin-based spray like Sawyer's. You can get them at Walmart, Target, Dick's Sporting Goods, all these places. You can spray your clothes, let that dry, and then it will actually repel ticks. And ticks get what they call a hot foot. Ticks will actually attach to you, and then it starts burning their feet, and they kind of do this wiggle dance, and they fall off. That permethrin spray will actually stay on your clothes through a couple washes. So you can spray your hiking boots, you can spray your socks, you can spray your pants.
Tuck your pants in your socks, right?
Tuck your pants in your socks. No one wants to do that because it doesn't look so fashionable.
Right.
But if you tuck your pants in your socks, the ticks can't climb up between your sock and your pants, and you'll notice them on your socks. We'll go out and if we're not wearing our full coveralls, a lot of times we actually wear full white coveralls where we actually duct tape our legs to our shoes. Because if we're in a really high Lyme endemic area where there's a lot of Lyme and a lot of ticks, we don't want to take a chance. They're white coveralls. We can actually see the ticks crawl if we can collect them. We actually sew the pockets shut so they won't climb into our pockets. We do a lot. We wear gloves. We duct tape if you see us out in the field, you're like, what are these people doing?
Like hazmat.
It's like, and people are like, oh, they're riding their bike and they'll stop and be like, uh-oh.
Right.
You know, like it's okay. We're just looking for ticks, but be aware. You know, you're out here and there's ticks out here. So for people, also using a deep-based spray, so 20 to 30% deep. You can use that on your skin. You can't use permethrin on your skin. It's toxic to you. It's also highly toxic to your cat and pollinators. So we don't like to spray it in the air. And you don't want your cat coming in contact with wet permethrin. So that's important to actually stress as well.
Right. Now, when you're out doing research, you can't spray yourself.
No.
Why is that?
Because we want to collect the tick.
So
we use our flags. We take this sheet of white cloth and we drag it and collect them with the flags. We also collect them off ourselves. We don't want to repel them. We don't want to kill them. We use them. So that's why we go to extreme measures to protect ourselves. But we have to, because last thing we want to do is to get injured or infected when you're working.
Right. Have you ever been?
I have never been. Knock on wood. I have gotten ticks. Recently I was out in Fayetteville showing a student how to collect ticks, and I usually do a really good job. But I got home and I did my tick check and told my wife to look. And I'm taking a shower that night. You know, one thing I tell people is do tick checks when you're out in the area. I'll check all the areas I think ticks are. And then one method that has been shown to be effective at preventing Lyme is doing tick checks. And also taking a shower shortly after being in the field, because you're more likely to see a tick on your body. And lo and behold, I'm in the mirror, got my shirt off, and I look at my shoulder. I'm like, that's a tick on my shoulder. And it was a nymphs zodiacularis embedded right here on my shoulder. So I went to my wife and said, hey, check it out. Got a picture on my cell phone. Pull the tick out, put it in some ethanol to save for later, because I also tell people that when you find a tick on yourself, save it. I have ethanol in tubes and tweezers laying around because that's what I do.
So rubbing alcohol would work.
Rubbing alcohol would work, or just put it in a Ziploc bag, throw it in your freezer, and save it. Because if you start developing flu-like symptoms, which is really the sign of the majority of tick-borne diseases, within a week or two, it's not flu season, go to your doctor and say, look doc, I got flu-like symptoms, I was out in my yard, here's my tick in my Ziploc bag, what can we do? It's much easier for us to identify pathogens in the tick or the potential pathogens by the species of tick than it really is to detect infection in humans.
While we're talking about ticks, they're very small,
Yes.
they're hard to find. You've got some samples here to show
I
us?
do, and they are dead, so we don't have to worry about them crawling away. All my live ticks are in a different
I feel bad
lab.
about that.
Yes, so we do have, and again, I will just pop them out on the thing here because they are actually deceased, which is a good thing. We'll pop a couple nymphs in here. The larvae we don't have; they're hiding away.
These are like a freckle. I mean, they're that small.
Yeah,
right?
so I don't know if we can see them, but this is the again. She's not jumping; she's just dry. So they react, they flip. This is the, I don't know if that helps.
You can hold it a little bit closer, that'd be good. Perfect, thank you.
So this is the adult female scapularis. You can see they have this rusty color abdomen that is called their alloscutum. This is the area that actually expands when they take a blood meal. This is the male Ixodes tick. The male is a little smaller than the female. He's black. They usually don't take blood meals. They're really there just to impregnate the female. They're black because they have what they call a full scutum. They don't have this area that expands like the female does. You can see the black area on the female.
Bring it a little bit closer. Perfect.
You can see the black area on the female. That's just extended all the way to the back of the male. So they're not really good at taking blood meals. Now here are the nymphal ticks. The nymphal ticks are very small. These are the ones that are most likely to transmit Lyme disease. They're the first ones that are actually capable of transmitting Lyme disease. And larval ticks are even smaller than the nymphal ticks.
Now the nymphs are the major carriers, and why is that?
They're not the major carriers because when a nymph's infected, when they molt to the adults, that adult will still be infected. So they do carry, actually adults carry rates higher than nymphs. The thing that difference about the adult and the nymphs is that the nymphs are much harder for us to see. When you have an adult female feeding on you, you can usually spot them fairly easy, but they can transmit Lyme disease. The nymph ticks feed from about 3 to 5 days. The adult ticks will feed up to 7 days. So they get much bigger. The adult ticks will get to about the size of a grape. The nymphal ticks are much smaller when they engorge. So when you find a tick on your dog, that big gray blob, that's an adult tick that's fully engorged.
Okay.
Cool.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll leave them here. They won't escape. I promise.
You mentioned dogs.
Yes.
So if you have a dog and the dog goes outside, what precautions should you take?
It's very hard, right? So the one thing that, follow your vet's recommendations. I'm not a vet, and I'll caveat saying that I'm not a research scientist, but you need to be treating your dog with the front line or whatever your vet is recommending. It's important to note that when the dog gets wet, that does decrease the efficacy of those types of topical treatments. So you want to just be aware. I have people say, hey, I just gave a front line to my dog and I found a tick right next to where I put the front line. I'm like, yeah, but if you gave them a bath and they went outside in the rain, it may be less effective. So it's always important to know that if the dog's out in an area where there's ticks, to do tick checks just like you do with humans. It's a lot harder with a dog, but we all love our furry friends, so it's important for us to take care of them as well.
So give them front line or the equivalent, check them and
check
come back in.
Check them.
If you've got a big black dog, that might be hard to find.
It might be, but you know what? We love our dogs, right? So you will spend the time. I mean, some people love them more than their kids, but you will spend the time on your kid. You'll spend the time on your dog.
Right. So if we talked about that, if you find a tick on you, what do you do?
If you find a tick on you, first thing you do is don't freak out. It'll be okay. Walk you through this. You take tweezers. I use tweezers like these, or fine tip tweezers, and you just grasp the tick at the base of the skin, and you just pull straight out, like you're plucking out a hair. You grasp the hair right at the base of your skin and pull straight out. That tick will come unattached. Put that tick in a Ziploc bag, some rubbing alcohol, put it away for a week or two, and hopefully you won't have any problems. But if you do, you'll have that tick to bring with you.
And the fine tip tweezers are easier to get the small ones, obviously.
Yeah, I keep these. Most people have tweezers. I actually didn't have this at my house. I do now. I used a regular pair of tweezers to remove the tick that was on me. But it's important just to grasp at the base, because remember the back, that scutum or the alloscutum area is the area that fills with blood, and you can pop that, and it's kind of nasty. But when you grab towards the base is the hardest part of the tick, and then that will help everything come out in one piece.
Glenn, can we reintroduce for people who are just joining in, and then we have some reader questions if that's okay for us to do?
All right. We are here at SUNY-ESF in Syracuse. I'm Glenn Coyne. I'm the environment reporter here for nymphs.com, Syracuse.com, and Post-Standard. We're here with Brian Leydet, who is a tick researcher, a tick disease researcher, both here and at Upstate Medical. And he's answering your questions about ticks, talking about why they've spread, about Lyme disease, how to protect yourself. So we've had some questions. We're willing to take some more if you've got some.
Yeah, so we've got one question about someone who had said that they had Lyme disease as a child but didn't know and suffered from insomnia, extreme discomfort, frequent headaches, bone weakness, and just general pain that they all attributed to Lyme disease when they found out 2 years later. So are those normal Lyme disease symptoms, and how bad can Lyme disease get if it's left untreated?
So this is a question I get a lot, and I'll have to start and caveat. I'm not a medical doctor, so I will caveat this. I do know the research very well because that is my field of expertise. So what I can comment on is what has been done in the realm of research, and a lot of disease research has been done in murine models. So a lot of the stuff we talk about in research are murine models or large-scale human population-based studies. So these are some of the signs and symptoms that people do attribute to long-term infection with Lyme disease. It's very worrisome that you were not treated or recognized early, and that's really important. We want people to get recognized early because I think there's a lot of debate in the Lyme disease field, but I think what can be agreed upon from anybody is early recognition and early treatment are essential for no long-term sequelae or complications. So that's why it's imperative for us to be educated and for doctors to be educated on the signs and symptoms for especially early Lyme disease. From what I hear from the symptoms described, people do describe these as symptoms associated with infection and other infection. The fact that it was not treated early, when Lyme disease is not treated early, more severe complications can arise. Usually with early Lyme disease, you have these flu-like symptoms. You may or may not have that rash, may or may not notice that bullseye rash. Not always a bullseye rash. It could be a filled-in rash. It could be multiple small rashes. But what is common is that rash does expand. So anytime I see a rash on me that's circular, I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have Lyme disease? What I do, and people I take a Sharpie and I draw a circle around it. And if the next morning I wake up and the rash is expanded upon that circle, I know it is actually expanding. Right. And that's why the rash is called an EM or an erythema migrating rash. But onto that, the long-term complications of untreated Lyme can be serious because the Lyme disease spirochete, after injected into the skin, does disseminate or go to other tissues. And those tissues, when they get to other tissues like your nervous system, your central nervous system, they can cause problems like facial palsy or meningitis, swelling of the meninges in your brain. And then you can have arthritis. So we do hear a lot about arthritis, major joint, when the bacteria get into your cartilage, into your joint, the immune response to that bacteria causes the swelling in your joint and just the influx of white blood cells and the dying of the white blood cells and just the swelling. And then lastly is the cardiac symptoms. So when spirochetes get into the cardiac tissue, they can actually cause disturbance in your natural electrical conductivity of the heart and cause what we call heart blocks, which actually disrupts electrical transmission in your heart and can cause abnormal cardiac signs in an electrocardiogram. And potentially, the serious side effect is death. If you block the electrical conduction, it can actually cause heart attacks and death.
So you can actually die from Lyme disease.
Yes, there are, and you can find in the literature is a lot of like healthy young men will just die from what we call third-degree heart block.
Wow.
And so that it is a serious side effect.
Now, caught early, treatment is right.
Treatment caught early, that is your best shot at not having long-term complications.
It's a dose of antibiotics.
It is doxycycline, a dose of antibiotics. With children, they use different antibiotics. Children are simple to doxycycline, but again, your doctor will prescribe that. I don't give medical advice. I talk about the literature.
But there's if you get it caught early, there is treatment that can generally.
Yes, that we really stress that, and my friends in upstate, the infectious disease doctors I work very close with, also stress that early detection, early treatment is your best bet.
Cool. We have one more reader question, and then I'll let you get back
okay,
to
sure.
the list. We have one that says, I'm 62. When I was a kid, we were in the woods all the time and never came home with a tick. Now you can forget it. So I guess his question might be, what has led to this spike in ticks? I myself are in cross country. We were in the woods all the time. That was just 4 years ago. So
right. So again, it's this ticks have a really unique life cycle, right? So when the adult female takes a blood meal and lays a bunch of eggs, they lay about 1,000 to 3,000 larvae. And they lay in these little egg clutches. And these larvae need to find a blood meal on a small mammal host. And they take a blood meal and they get fully engorged with blood, and they go through a process called molting. It's kind of like metamorphosis, like a caterpillar into a butterfly. The larvae have 6 legs. They actually grow an extra pair of legs. They get a little bigger. They turn into nymphs. But that process needs time. And it needs certain climatic conditions. And a lot of time is this almost like your plants. We can grow certain types of plants in our zone. I think we're zone 5. If I'm wrong, I'm sure my colleagues will yell at me. We can grow certain types of plants in zone 5 that Florida can't grow. Florida can grow certain types of plants that we can't grow in Syracuse, New York. And that's because of things that we know of heating or growing degree days. And ticks need the same thing to get through their whole life cycle and have it timed perfectly. And there are certain environments that don't have enough of these days to facilitate the life cycle for large numbers of ticks. So as climate change occurs, we have more warm days that help the biological life cycle and this tick to get through this life cycle. So that's really what's happening, and that's why we're seeing the establishment and emergence. And it takes time, right? 4 years ago, there may have been ticks, but you may have never encountered them because they're spread low density across the environment. And some of the stuff we're seeing in the Adirondacks, right? I have a student out there right now who can go out and try to get ticks through flagging and dragging that I can get a ton of ticks here. She can't pick up a tick, but she's finding them on the small mammals because they're out there all the time. They're like carp, they're dragging, they're getting the ticks for us. So, you know, it's our detection threshold is different. And people won't really start detecting ticks on them until they're at a really higher density.
Which they're, and that density is increasing.
Oh yeah, I mean we got ticks here. You can go out in Fayetteville and get 40 ticks in no time on a flag. I did it a couple weeks ago.
At Green Ice or?
No, actually just right across from the Wegmans in DeWitt at a little site. So right in people's backyards. You have to really be careful.
So we have to assume that in any place with high grass or
forest. They're like the forest cover, right? So if you're in a big field with high grass and there's no forest cover, ticks are very susceptible to drying out and heat, and they die. They just don't like being hot. So if a tick gets dropped off in there, they may live for a little bit, but then they'll eventually dry out and they'll die. We call it desiccation. It's when they have cover. When they have cover from the heat and the sun, they'll live longer. They'll be able to stay more hydrated. And they'll live longer. That's usually where you encounter them. Also, forests, unlike a pine forest, would not be a very good place either because at the hottest times of the day, a lot of the ticks, the majority of the population will go down under the leaf litter. Leaf litter is moist. It's being degraded. It just has a very nice controlled microclimate. In pine forest, you have a bunch of pine needles, and you can imagine the wind going through. And wind is a good convector of heat and actually helps dry out the ticks. So that's why people say mulch around your yard, right? Because mulch or rocks, it holds heat, it will kill ticks. Wind passes through, and that helps kill the ticks that do get dropped off in those types of substrate. Do you mind if I pull up the bacteria?
No, go ahead. That'd be cool.
I think that would be cool, right? Hopefully they're alive. Hopefully my students are doing their job.
More active.
Is it a GFP? Oh, great. My students are doing a great job.
Brian is going to pull up a photograph of what the bacteria actually looks like that these ticks carry.
I'm going to do better with a photograph. I'm going to give you a live picture of them, so you'll see them moving and glowing. So these are the bacteria that cause Lyme disease.
You'll see over here.
You'll see them on here once I pull them up. They have been genetically modified to express a protein found in jellyfish known as GFP, so they glow under a fluorescent light. Okay. So we can see them better if we infect, or we can actually see them better than in their natural form. So let's make sure I work my microscope and
Glenn, while we're waiting, why don't you just one more time quickly let everybody know where we are and encourage them to leave their questions.
Sure. One more time. I'm Glenn Coyne. I'm a reporter here at NY Up. We are here at SUNY-ESF in Syracuse with Brian Leydet, who is a tick and tick-borne disease researcher, both here and he's an adjunct over at Upstate Medical. He's answering your questions about why ticks are increasing, why Lyme disease is spreading, and most importantly, what you can do to protect yourself against a pretty serious disease. The idea being ways to protect yourself in your yard, when you're out walking through high grass, how to keep your dogs from bringing ticks in the house. And as Brian mentioned, ticks and Lyme disease are endemic. They are pretty much everywhere. He picks some up across from Wegmans in DeWitt. So we have to assume anytime you go out into a forested or area that has high grass, you're going to encounter ticks. And there's a good chance that those ticks are going to have Lyme disease, carry the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. So if you have any questions for Brian, we've got a few more minutes to do this Facebook Live, and he's happy to answer them. Right now he's pulling up this picture of the bacteria that these ticks carry that causes Lyme disease.
So if they'll cooperate with me.
We have some uncooperative bacteria.
You know, they like infecting humans, but they're very, very hard to grow in the lab. They're very hard to grow in the laboratory. Unlike other bacteria, something like E. coli can double its bacteria. It can double in 20 minutes. This bacteria takes 14 to 24 hours to split into 2 bacteria, so they take forever to grow.
That is a slow growth.
Which is very hard when you're doing research because you have to time your experiments perfectly. And I'm going to try to see if we can get a good image of the spirochete. They're not; these ones aren't very motile. We just subcultured them. But let's see if we can pull up a clear image of these guys. Yeah, this one's not super. No, that's not always true. Studies out there that other medium to large mammals do support and feed the Exotiscapularis. What's important to know is that the black-legged tick will not feed on mice, smaller mammals. They prefer medium to larger mammals. Deer are great because they're huge. They have a lot of blood. They feed a lot of ticks. But raccoon, skunk, coyote, your fisher. Those types of animals will feed these groundhogs, which we got tons of. Right. Will feed these ticks, and when you talk about the female laying 3,000 eggs, if a groundhog has 10 adult ticks that are laying 3,000 eggs, you got 30,000 larvae now in nature. And as long as you have the mice infected, you can have infected nymphs.
Right. I've got chipmunks and squirrels all over the place.
Now, those will feed mainly the immature stages, so the larvae and the nymph. The adults don't parasitize the squirrels and the chipmunks. So you're looking at a little larger than a squirrel and a chipmunk.
But if you've got chipmunks and squirrels around, there's a source then for the
nymphs. Yeah, the nymphs definitely. Yeah, chipmunks will become infected. What a lot of people don't know and what is really not well studied are shrew, which we have a lot of shrew and vole. Can become infected, and they do feed the nymphs and the larvae. And I know we combat them every year when the snow melts. You've got the runs in your yard. I know I'm dealing with them, trying to get rid of the shrews and the voles, but they are competent reservoirs and not just mice. Right. So it's a very complex ecosystem. Right. Ecology.
Right. I think we're going to wrap up soon.
Yeah, we'll wrap up. I got one more question I think that we can take. Someone wrote, is there any way to protect against or prevent tick bites in a toddler? She's hesitant to use bug spray or DEET on her child. And are there any sort of more natural options?
We recently had our first child, my wife and I, and we have a 9-month-old at home, Lucas. Very, very long. I got my PhD. I'd probably do a PhD all over again, other than having a child. It's really tough, but but I love him. And that's something I think about all the time. There are these organic sprays. I don't know how well they work. So I go back to that, having your child wear the long clothes. It's probably easier to tuck your child's socks into the pants. They probably don't care what they look like, per se, in nature, when they're out there playing in the yard. The permethrin is fair. I think it's shown to be pretty safe. And once it's actually dried on clothing, there's very little chance of it actually causing problems in the skin. You can buy clothes like the sportswear companies make ones that are impregnated with bug permethrin and bug resistance, so that may be a good way to look. But probably the best thing to do is when your child comes back inside, and something that I will do with my child once he begins to walk, is check them for ticks. Have them stand still, look for ticks, and when you do see a tick, take them off. Get them inside, take a shower, get a good look at them, and take the tick off when you do see it. Save the tick, because if they do develop flu-like symptoms, you go to your pediatrician and bring that tick along with you.
You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I just want to wrap up and just kind of have you sum up in a minute or so what people need to know about Lyme disease, in particular, making sure they don't get it.
Sure. So, Lyme disease is here, and it's likely here to stay until we can really find a way to combat it, which there's active work being done for that. Ticks are here. They're in large numbers in upstate New York, so it's important for us to be educated to know that ticks are there. When we're out in the environment, we're doing things to protect ourselves from ticks. Light-colored clothing, looking for them, knowing they're there, using bug spray, the deep base, the permethrin on your clothes. When you get home, doing tick checks, knowing you're in an area with ticks, taking a shower, looking for the ticks, pulling the tick off, saving the tick. And if you develop symptoms of the flu in the summer, when the flu is not going around, to go to your physician, to bring the tick, and to say, look, could this be a coincidence? And hopefully getting early treatment. So again, it's being aware and educated. And that's why I love doing events like this, because I can keep stressing how important it is for people to be aware.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Right, I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to our Facebook Live with Brian Leydet, researcher here at ESF. Thanks.